feel it in my heart, genuinely, to make this video. I've been in America now for nearly 3 weeks. I've got 2 days left. And the way the media portrays America is not what it's like in reality. America is a beautiful place. The people are wonderful. I'm gonna go home seeing America in a total different light. It is one of the best places I have ever been. The people are incredible. Even an example for today. I was out in Texas in the middle of nowhere. A lady drives by. She says, "Look, I'm a follower. Can I get a photo?" No problem. She drives off. She comes back 10 minutes later, says, "Josh, I've got a present for you." She gives me this, an American flag to take home with me. Now, if that doesn't symbolize the love of the American people, I don't know what will. America, you have my heart. You are a beautiful country, and I promise I'll be coming back soon.
Media has been lying to us for years. And you know what's proved it? The World Cup has proved it. A lot of Europeans and a lot of Brits think the USA is dangerous, the food is unhealthy, it's not a country we should visit. Like, the media is feeding us lies for years. Like, whatever we see on the news, we think that's exactly how America is. But it actually isn't like this. Every country had its bad and good side. The USA is completely different to what they tell us on the media. I've been there, I've experienced it. The people are so accommodating. Their hospitality is amazing. People are too nice in the USA. And I'm not just saying that as a Brit, like, I'm saying that as someone who's visited the USA and experienced it. You have to go experience it. The World Cup has proven that so many people from all around the world have loved the USA. Like, we've just been lied to. We've been lied to for many, many years, and that's the way it shouldn't be. So anyway, hopefully you see this video, and if you want to go to America, 100% go, because listen, if not, you're missing out.
So the media portrays America as this dystopian land of guns, greed, and McDonald's. But as a Canadian that moved here 3 years ago, my experience has been completely different. Watching all the World Cup tourists absolutely fall in love with America right now reminds me of how I felt and still feel when I first came here for part of my medical training. This country just has an abundance of diversity, opportunity, and kindness that I've honestly never felt anywhere else. I live in LA, and if you drive 10 miles in any direction, you'll be plunged into a different, totally vibrant subculture. And people will genuinely connect with you here, beyond just a hello. Whether it's the groceries, festivals, the park, staff at grocery store come up to me and ask me, "Is there anything I can help you find?" And the sheer scale of what you can do here, whether it's tech, medicine, creative industries, is unmatched. In America, you can basically be whoever you want to be and do whatever you want to do. And not only is that normal, but people will actually cheer you on. It sounds cliche, but living in America has made me realize how good everyday Americans are and how lucky they are. I think America might be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, countries on earth, even if the internet can't admit it.
What if the America Europeans were warned about is not the America they actually find? What happens when higher pay, lower everyday taxes, cheaper fuel, bigger personal freedom, and a culture built around convenience begin replacing years of negative headlines? Suddenly, the uncomfortable question is not why America is so different from Britain. It is why so many of its everyday advantages were barely mentioned at all. America stays open. The first surprise is almost embarrassingly ordinary. On a Sunday evening in America, life is still fully switched on. A supermarket can be busy, a pharmacy can still be serving customers, restaurants are filling tables, and somebody is calmly buying a garden hose at an hour when many large shops in England would already have finished trading. It sounds like a tiny detail until you realize how much freedom is hiding inside something as boring as opening hours. In England and Wales, large shops over 280 square meters are generally limited to 6 continuous hours of Sunday trading between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. That rhythm is completely normal if you grow up with it. In London, Manchester, or Birmingham, people plan around the clock because the clock wins. Then compare that with large parts of the United States, where Sunday shopping is often treated much more like any other day, with supermarkets, big box stores, pharmacies, restaurants, and service businesses staying open well into the evening depending on local rules and company policy. That difference changes the mood of daily life more than outsiders expect. America has a strange talent for making inconvenience feel negotiable. Forgot milk at 8:30 p.m.? There's probably somewhere to go. Landed late and need toothpaste, cold medicine, or a phone charger? The country often answers with a glowing parking lot and automatic doors. It is not glamorous, but neither is discovering at home that the one thing you need is sitting behind a locked door until tomorrow. This is where the American version of convenience starts to feel almost luxurious. Not luxury in the champagne and marble sense, but the practical kind. Your schedule does not always have to bow to the shop's schedule. In places like suburban Dallas, Phoenix, or Orlando, long retail hours fit naturally into a culture built around driving, shift work, late dinners, family errands, and the simple assumption that people may need things at inconvenient times. British life has its own charm in slower Sundays, and many people genuinely like that protected rhythm. But for visitors accustomed to planning carefully around restricted hours, America can feel unusually responsive. The country behaves a little like that dependable friend who says, "Yeah, I'm still up, what do you need?" without making a ceremony out of it. And perhaps that is why such a small difference leaves such a strong impression. The America often presented from far away is loud, chaotic, and exhausting. Yet the America people meet in ordinary life can be surprisingly accommodating. Sometimes the most persuasive argument for a country is not a monument, a speech, or a grand promise. Sometimes it is a supermarket light still glowing at 9 on Sunday night, quietly saying that your day is not over just because the clock says it should be. For an American audience, that may sound completely unremarkable, which is exactly the point. Everyday convenience becomes invisible when you have lived with it for long enough already. The paycheck surprise, Barb. There's a particular kind of American culture shock that does not happen on a highway, inside a supermarket, or at a restaurant table. It happens when somebody mentions a salary, and suddenly everyone around them starts doing silent math. That is where one of the most persistent ideas about America begins to wobble. From Europe, the United States is often discussed through its costs. Rent in New York, medical bills, college tuition, restaurant tips, and the price of living in major coastal cities. Those things are real, and pretending otherwise would be silly. What often gets left out of the same conversation, though, is the other half of the equation. American households also have unusually high earning power. The OECD's Better Life data has placed U.S. household net adjusted disposable income per person at roughly $50,000 a year, compared with about $33,000 in the United Kingdom. That gap is not pocket change hiding under the couch cushions. It is closer to discovering that the couch itself came with another couch. And this is where the difference becomes cultural rather than merely statistical. In Britain, a professional salary that sounds respectable in Manchester, Birmingham, or even parts of London can look surprisingly modest beside the pay offered for comparable work in many American industries. Technology, engineering, medicine, finance, skilled trades, logistics, and specialized business roles can all offer compensation ceilings that are difficult to match across the Atlantic. The United States has a gigantic consumer market, deep capital markets, hundreds of major corporations, and an economy where companies frequently compete aggressively for experienced workers. That competition matters. A country with more than 330 million people also has thousands of employers fighting for the same useful skills, which gives ambitious workers something Americans tend to take for granted: room to move. Changing companies, moving states, negotiating compensation, collecting bonuses, or taking a promotion across the country can be part of a normal career strategy rather than an extraordinary life decision. The American paycheck also changes how people experience prices. A $25 dinner means something different when the salary behind it is larger. So does a $500 appliance, a weekend road trip, or replacing a broken laptop without treating the purchase like a small parliamentary budget crisis. None of this means every American is wealthy, because income inequality remains substantial and living costs vary enormously between Mississippi and Manhattan. The useful comparison is not America is cheap. It is that the American economy can give people far more earning headroom than outsiders often expect. That distinction matters because affordability is never just about what something costs. It is also about how quickly you can earn the money back. And that may explain why the United States can become strangely addictive for people who spend enough time working there. The country encourages a very American thought. Maybe the next job pays more, maybe the next city offers more, maybe the ceiling is not actually the ceiling. Britain offers stability, strong institutions, and a way of life millions of people rightly value. America adds something different to the mix: economic scale with a little gasoline poured on ambition. Once somebody gets used to seeing that larger number land in the bank account every month, the flight home can start looking just a little less urgent. The gas pump twist. There's something almost comical about watching an American complain about gasoline while a British visitor quietly studies the price board like someone who has just discovered a secret employee discount. The joke is not that fuel is cheap everywhere in the United States, because prices can vary sharply by state, season, and local taxes. The surprise comes from how different the baseline feels when you are used to paying British pump prices. Britain taxes road fuel heavily through fuel duty and VAT, while the United States applies a much smaller federal gasoline tax of 18.4 cents per gallon, with individual states adding their own levies. During recent years, regular gasoline in the United States has often hovered around the $3 to $4 per gallon range nationally, while British petrol has frequently cost well above $1.40 per liter. Convert those figures carefully, and the gap can become large enough that a full tank stops looking like a minor financial ceremony. That changes behavior in ways a price chart cannot fully explain. In Britain, someone living around London, Bristol, or Manchester may think twice before turning an ordinary weekend into a 200-mile drive, especially once fuel, parking, and other costs begin joining the conversation. Across much of America, a similar distance can feel far less dramatic, which helps explain why people casually drive to another city for a football game, a family barbecue, a concert, or apparently because one restaurant 2 counties away makes a better brisket sandwich. This is where inexpensive fuel becomes something more interesting than cheaper transportation. It creates a culture where distance feels negotiable. America is enormous, yet the country has spent generations making that enormousness surprisingly usable, with interstates, gas stations, roadside restaurants, rest areas, truck stops, and businesses built around people who think nothing of watching the odometer climb for several hours. There's also a deeper reason the comparison exists. The United States became the world's largest producer of crude oil in recent years, reaching record production above 13 million barrels per day, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Britain still produces oil from the North Sea, but output has declined substantially from its historic peak, leaving the country far more exposed to imported energy and international market swings. America does not magically escape global oil prices, although domestic production gives it a scale of supply that Britain simply cannot match. That scale filters into everyday psychology. A road trip in America often begins with someone tossing bags into the trunk, checking the GPS, buying a coffee large enough to require its own cup holder, and simply leaving. The car becomes less like an expensive appliance that must be rationed carefully, and more like a ticket to a continent-sized backyard. British cities deserve credit for offering stronger public transport in many places, particularly London, where driving can be the least sensible option available. America made a different bargain, building much of its daily life around personal mobility, and lower fuel taxation helped make that bargain workable for millions of households. Perhaps that is why the humble American gas pump can feel strangely persuasive. It does not promise luxury, and it certainly does not make anyone cheerful when prices rise, but it quietly offers something many visitors value almost immediately: the freedom to look at a place 3 hours away and think, without much drama, we could actually go there today. The checkout secret. A British shopper can spend 10 minutes feeling smug about American price tags, then reach the checkout and discover that the number has quietly changed. That little surprise has become one of the easiest American habits for Europeans to joke about, because Britain normally includes VAT in the display price, while most US stores add sales tax at the register. Fair enough. America loses the elegance contest there. But once the laughing stops and somebody actually compares the tax itself, the story becomes much more interesting. Britain's standard VAT rate is 20%. In the United States, there is no federal general sales tax, and state and local rates vary widely. Combined rates commonly land somewhere around the mid to high single digits, while Delaware, Montana, New Hampshire, and Oregon have no statewide general sales tax at all. Alaska also has no statewide sales tax, although local governments can impose their own. That means an American checkout may be less predictable, yet the tax sitting underneath many everyday purchases can be considerably lighter. The difference becomes easier to appreciate when the shopping cart gets expensive. Take a $1,000 laptop. A tax gap of 10 percentage points is no longer some accounting detail hiding in 12-point font. It is $100, which is roughly the point where people stop saying percentage and start saying, that could have paid for dinner. This helps explain something visitors often notice about American consumer culture. Shopping here can feel unusually competitive. States compete, cities compete, retailers compete, outlet centers compete, and online stores keep everybody nervous. The customer walks into that system holding the one thing every business wants: the right to spend money somewhere else. America seems almost suspiciously comfortable with that idea. Look at Delaware, where the lack of a statewide sales tax has become part of the state's identity and even attracts shoppers from neighboring Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New Jersey. Across the country to Oregon, and the same basic advantage appears again. In Britain, meanwhile, someone buying the same taxable consumer product in London, Leeds, or Bristol generally encounters the same 20% standard VAT structure. Neither system is inherently perfect. Britain's approach has the obvious advantage of showing customers a cleaner final price, and VAT helps fund public services that British residents value. The American model is messier because 50 states apparently looked at one tax system and decided 50 versions would be more entertaining. Yet that mess creates choice. The deeper attraction is not simply paying a few dollars less at the register, it is living inside an economy where geography can change the deal. Taxes, prices, competition, and shopping patterns can shift when you cross a state border, giving consumers options that are harder to reproduce inside a more nationally standardized system. This is one of those American advantages that rarely makes international headlines because a receipt is not exactly cinematic. Still, after enough purchases, people notice when more of their money survives the journey from shelf to parking lot. And suddenly that strange little moment at the register feels different. The tax appears late, yes, but compared with Britain's 20% VAT, many shoppers may decide America's checkout surprise is one they can learn to forgive. The space upgrade. At some point in America, the square footage stops feeling like a housing statistic and starts feeling like a practical joke. A kitchen has an island large enough to host Thanksgiving negotiations, the garage swallows 2 cars without touching the lawnmower, and the basement appears to have more floor space than an entire flat back in London. The surprise is not simply that American homes are bigger, it is how quickly all that extra room changes what normal life feels like, guys. Census Bureau data on new single-family homes has repeatedly put typical new home sizes above 2,000 square feet, with recent medians sitting comfortably above that mark. In England, government housing surveys place the average usable floor area of existing homes at roughly 90 square meters, or just under 1,000 square feet. The datasets measure different housing stocks, so they are not a perfect one-to-one comparison, but the scale difference is difficult to miss. In London, where every extra bedroom can feel like it requires approval from both the bank and the royal family, space is naturally treated as a premium resource. Victorian terraces, converted flats, and compact kitchens are part of the city's character. Manchester and Birmingham generally offer more room for the money, yet the American suburban formula can still feel like someone dragged the corner of the floor plan outward and simply forgot to stop. What makes that space addictive is not bragging rights, it is what begins disappearing from daily life. The dining table no longer has to double as a desk, storage zone, homework station, and emergency ironing board. A family can keep bicycles in a garage rather than performing hallway Tetris every evening. Grocery shopping changes when the kitchen has a pantry instead of 3 heroic cupboards fighting for their lives. Having guests overnight does not automatically trigger a military operation involving sofa cushions. Americans often see these things as ordinary because much of the country was built under very different land pressures from Britain. The United States has vast suburban regions where detached housing could spread outward around highways and metropolitan areas. Britain, especially southeast England, combines far tighter land constraints with older urban patterns and strong development restrictions. One country learned to squeeze remarkable usefulness into compact spaces. The other often answered the same problem by adding another room. That physical space eventually becomes mental space. It means hobbies can stay set up instead of being packed away after every use. Kids can make noise somewhere other than directly beside the television. Someone working from home can close a door and briefly stop hearing the dishwasher conduct its afternoon symphony. Even storage changes the emotional temperature of a household, because clutter becomes less of a daily negotiation. There is a reason American basements, garages, walk-in closets, mudrooms, laundry rooms, and oversized pantries fascinate visitors more than Americans sometimes understand. Each one removes a small friction from ordinary living. Britain has beautiful, historic housing that America cannot reproduce simply by adding square footage, and compact urban living comes with advantages of its own. Yet once someone becomes accustomed to having room for the things they already own, shrinking life back down can feel surprisingly difficult. America's most seductive luxury may not have a designer label at all. Sometimes it is simply the ability to leave the vacuum cleaner somewhere without having to discuss it first. America has more, outside. The strangest thing about America's wilderness is how casually it enters the conversation. Someone in Denver mentions spending Saturday in Rocky Mountain National Park as if they were talking about running errands. A family in Phoenix can wake up, throw a cooler into the car, and point the hood toward landscapes that look like somebody forgot to turn off the movie set. In Britain, beautiful countryside is everywhere, but America operates on a scale that can completely reset what people think a weekend outdoors is supposed to look like. The numbers explain why. The US. Federal government manages roughly 640 million acres of land, close to 28% of the nation's total land area. The National Park Service alone oversees more than 85 million acres across over 400 sites, including 63 designated national parks. Britain has 15 national parks, and many of them are gorgeous places with deep cultural history, from the Lake District to Snowdonia and the Cairngorms. America simply brings an entirely different amount of geography to the table. That difference becomes addictive because the scenery refuses to repeat itself. Drive through Utah and the earth suddenly turns red, with sandstone cliffs rising like giant pieces of burnt orange layer cake. Head toward Tennessee and the Great Smoky Mountains wrap the roads in green ridges and morning mist. Florida gives you wetlands filled with alligators. California somehow keeps redwood forests, deserts, Pacific cliffs, and snow-covered mountains inside the same state, while Alaska looks like the continent saved its dramatic finale for last. The American road trip tradition grew naturally around that abundance. People do not always need an elaborate expedition with matching outdoor gear and a spreadsheet labeled adventure. Sometimes it is a cooler, folding chairs, a state park pass, and an argument over who forgot the bug spray. The outdoors becomes less of a special occasion and more like another room attached to the country. That is an important cultural difference. Britain's countryside often carries visible layers of human history. Stone walls, villages, farms, footpaths, old estates, and landscapes shaped over centuries. It can feel intimate and beautifully lived in. American wilderness often produces almost the opposite sensation. There are places where the horizon seems to have no interest whatsoever in human beings, and that can be strangely refreshing. Even Americans occasionally forget how unusual this is because Yosemite, Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, Acadia, Zion, and hundreds of other protected places have always been sitting on the national map. From outside, however, the idea that one country contains glaciers, subtropical wetlands, active volcanoes, giant sequoias, coral reefs, deserts, alpine lakes, and canyons a mile deep feels less like geography and more like someone kept clicking add to cart. The real luxury is variety within reach. Las Vegas can lead to Zion, Seattle can lead to Olympic National Park, Denver points toward the Rockies while Miami sits within driving distance of the Everglades. These are not remote fantasy landscapes reserved for documentaries. Millions of Americans can build them into ordinary vacations and long weekends. Perhaps that is what makes this side of America so difficult to stop exploring. Every time you think you understand the country, the road bends and the landscape changes its mind. Britain can give you a countryside that feels like history still breathing beside the road. America gives you something equally special, but completely different. The thrilling suspicion that somewhere beyond the next state line, the planet has prepared another surprise. Take it back. One of America's strangest luxuries begins after you have already spent the money. You buy the shoes, take them home, walk around the living room, decide they somehow make your feet look like 2 rental canoes, and then remember something wonderfully American. There's a very good chance the store will simply take them back. That sounds ordinary to Americans because generous return policies have become part of the retail landscape. Yet the interesting part is that US federal law generally does not force stores to accept a perfectly good product merely because the customer changed their mind. Retailers often choose to offer generous return windows anyway, because in a brutally competitive market, making a purchase feel safe can be just as important as making it cheap. Britain protects consumers strongly in other ways. Under UK rules, online shoppers generally receive a 14-day cooling-off period for many purchases, while faulty goods receive important protections under the Consumer Rights Act. However, for something bought in a physical shop that is perfectly fine, a simple change of mind does not automatically create a legal right to a refund. Whether the store accepts it can depend on its own policy. America turned that discretion into a competitive sport. Major US. Retailers commonly offer return periods measured in weeks or months. While some membership retailers became famous for satisfaction guarantees broad enough to make the receipt feel less like a final judgment and more like a temporary custody agreement. The National Retail Federation estimated that US consumers returned roughly $743 billion worth of merchandise in 2023, representing about 14.5% of total retail sales. That figure also shows the downside because returns are enormously expensive for businesses and can generate waste, fraud, and logistical headaches. Yet companies keep offering them. The reason reveals something deeper about American consumer culture. Retailers are terrified of making the customer hesitate. A generous return policy quietly removes risk from the purchase. The sofa looked great under showroom lighting but becomes the size of Nebraska once it reaches the living room? There may be a solution. The jacket fit perfectly until your own mirror presented additional evidence? Keep the tags nearby. An appliance turns out to have more buttons than a Boeing cockpit, while you only want a toast? America understands that relationships sometimes fail. That freedom changes shopping behavior because the decision no longer feels permanent at the cash register. Consumers can experiment more easily, and businesses have an incentive to earn loyalty after the transaction rather than treating the transaction as the finish line. Anyone who has dealt with return shipping knows the American system is hardly effortless, and individual policies vary considerably. Britain's statutory consumer protections are also stronger in several important areas, so this is not a case of one country having rights while the other has none. The cultural contrast is subtler and more interesting than that. Britain often gives consumers a clearly defined legal floor. American retailers frequently compete to build something above their legal floor because another store across town is waiting for the same customer. That may be the most American detail of all. Even after a business already has your money, competition keeps whispering in its ear that you could still take your money somewhere else next time. After living with that kind of flexibility, a receipt starts to feel surprisingly powerful. It is no longer proof that the decision is over. Sometimes it is proof that America is still willing to let you change your mind. Maybe that is the real surprise America leaves behind. Not one dramatic revelation, but dozens of ordinary freedoms that become difficult to stop noticing once you have lived with them. Britain has plenty worth loving, yet America has a way of making everyday life feel bigger, easier, and full of possibility. Which American advantage do you think visitors underestimate most? Tell us below, and subscribe to the channel if you want more stories that challenge what people think they know.